Hello and welcome to Fiber Trek. We have a little change up here as I'm trying to just make time early in the week for the podcast. I wasn't able to podcast last week because I had a friend in town and I had a shoot. Things were just a bit over the top. So I also have a dinner party. No, it's not even a dinner party. It's a dinner meeting that I'm preparing for, and I have to leave here fairly soon. But I thought I'd try to get this in. I did text Morgan to see if she was able to come, and I haven't heard back from her. So if you hear vibrating, that might be her answering me. But I thought I would go ahead and just catch you up. I do have a Textiles in Time prepared, and I have some acquisitions and discoveries. More, always more. I, of course, have welcomes, and I have a fond farewell. I have a Fiber Trek shoot to talk about. I have works in progress, but epic fail these past 2 weeks on my projects. I think I caught it from the podcast A Homespun House with Molly. She had been talking a little bit about her mojo being on the down curve, and I somehow think I caught that. But I know it'll all come back. So I know you're like, wow, she's wearing wool. I'm freezing. I paddled this morning. This is a little down the pike episode. I paddled this morning in the pouring rain. It was 60 degrees with a bit of wind with 7th and 8th graders. And I was sopping wet right down to my skivvies. And, you know, of all the things that I choose to wear, this might be a little bit too much information for you, but of all the things that I choose to wear and being and doing all the outdoor things that I do, you probably are surprised that I wear cotton skivvies. And I'm like sitting in my boat today, completely wet and freezing, and I'm like, I'm wearing cotton underpants. I was. So I typically when I paddle, I have a long wool, I have like a lightweight long wool, long john wools. I can't even put my adjectives together today. And then I throw on a pair of precip pants over that, precipitation pants or water resistant pant. And then I wear a wool top, and typically like a silk undershirt, and then I put on my splash top, and then I put on my PFD. So I'm all prepared on the outside. I just got to start on the inside, right? So I was freezing, and I came home, and I just decided I would throw this on over my shoulders because it is looking sunny out. I'm not sure what the temp's going to be for the high tonight. So I digress just a bit, with a little bit too much information for you. Anyway, welcome to the show. My name is Sarah. Today is June 10th. You know, I had to look at the side there. And this is Fiber Trek episode 9? 9 or 10. You'll know because it'll say that in the thread, or you'll figure it out because the next one will be 11 or 10. Oh, we're spiraling down fast. I want to thank everyone who's returning and anyone who's just joining us for the first time. I also had heard from a number of our Ravelry members this week with lovely messages and kind words of support, and they were not missed or unappreciated. In fact, they were read out loud to my husband and shared with my best friend, and it was just great to be able to share the enthusiasm that I experience with people who are not necessarily in the inner circle. So I did hear from a couple Ravelry members. I heard from All That Cake, who heard about the podcast from the Good Yarn Guide, which is a great podcast from Britain, and I believe she is blogging quite often and has not been putting up video casts as often as she used to due to some personal circumstances of time and busyness. So her previous episodes are fun, and of course anytime she puts one up, it's good to catch up. I heard from Grammy Knitterbug, who is from Louisiana, and I didn't have an opportunity or make the connection because that's me in this moment, that she is from the same state as CM Farms, which is carrying the Gulf Coast native. So Grammy Interbug, if you have any insight into CM Farm and Gulf Coast native fleeces. You can certainly post on the boards if you find out anything interesting. I hope you are managing to stay pretty cool down in Louisiana and get to wear your woolens at some point this summer, if you knit with wool, of course. I heard from Cowbell Makes, and she highlighted that her ultimate fiber trek would be to Scotland, Iceland, and Scandinavia, and you, of course, can take me with you because that would be ultimate. She also kind of correlates a little bit with my lifestyle, which would be she is very interested in the lives and well-being of animals and dogs especially, and that's right near and dear to my heart. And I also heard from Kirby Bird, who has Beagle, who thinks she is a watchdog. I think that's what she said. She has a cute little comment in her thread about being a watchdog or a lapdog. And she likes to just travel to make sheep sounds and buy unique yarns. So sign me up for that trip too. So thank you so much for taking that time to post in the thread. And a number of you also posted in the previous threads on Coyotes and Textiles and Time your interest and questions and general support. So thank you very much. I love seeing messages in the morning with my coffee. I am an epic fail for works in progress, and I don't even have a bow finished object. I am working on the Brush Creek cowlet. I thought it would be a nice palette cleanser, having finished Shield Maiden and the Brioche Cowl, and I'm not having a very good cleanse. Oh, good God, there it goes. So last time I showed you, I think I had a good majority of the first portion done and had joined in the round, and then why did I rip this out? Why did I rip it out? There was a reason. I can't remember. Anyway, I ripped it out. This is Brooklyn Tweed Loft, and I am knitting this on size US 7 needles, which is 4.5 millimeter. And Brooklyn Tweed, this is by Karina Spencer, I believe. Yes. So, oh, I know what my epic fail was. So there are these purl ridges, which you can just basically see right here. And I had forgotten all of them. Rats. So I ripped it out and I've restarted it, and I haven't had much opportunity to work on it. So that is current. The Burnham Wood Capelet. Do I need to even tell you about that? You can't see any difference. I have knit on it. I had a little bit of a moment because I read the pattern and I'm like, woohoo! I'm like, I think I'm on like row 2 of the last repeat of what I thought was the last repeat, but it's not the last repeat. That's the face. There it is. So I'm on the last increase repeat. And after this, I'm supposed to do 4 more repeats of the chart without increasing. But I don't think I have enough yarn to do that and the bind off. So I'm going to finish this. I may do 1 more chart, just straight up, no increasing, and then bind off. Because I think it'll still be beautiful, and I think it will still have drape and all the things that I want. It just won't come down to my waist. So that is a bear, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's totally worth it, but it's not worth hauling it out because you can't see. I know I could mark it, but I don't. It's just not who I am. So that's the works in progress. I am planning on casting on another project this weekend. I haven't decided what that is. Depends on how I fare with this Brush Creek Colette. If I feel like it starts to take off, which it should, that may decide where I go next and what inspires me next. So that's it for the knitting. I know. So can I make any more faces? I do have a couple acquisitions and discoveries since I went to the main Fiber Frolic. I did not run into friends. I got to see Heather of Highland Handmaids and connect with her enough to say, I want to connect more. When can we get together? So we're going to plan to get together another time. I did pick up from her tent a purchase I had made a while ago. This is Beowulf and her white ash worsted. And that's pretty representative. I'm going to knit the baby latte coat for my nephew out of this. And again, the colorway is Beowulf, and I just love it. It's just enough to be kind of not brown, which makes me very happy. Plus, I love Beowulf. So, and I thought that was fitting. We should start him young on the good sagas. Um, and so Beowulf it is. She has a lovely colorway selection for her black ash worsted. And if you remember, my husband knit his barley hat out of the black ash worsted in the Katahdin colorway. So very happy about that. But that was purchased a while ago on the internet. And I was like, I don't want to pay the shipping. I'll see you. And then I haven't seen her in, I don't know, I think I bought that 2 months ago. More than that. I think I bought it in February. So I also found something very exciting, which I've been waiting forever to find. Can you say, hello, Fern? There she is. I have saw this woman's yarns last year at the Fiber Frolic, and I did not buy any. And then this year I was like, I am going to Title Yarns, and I am buying yarn because it's beautiful. It's overdyed gray yarn, I know, but at least it's overdyed. So she starts with a variety of different bases, but I think these happen to be overdyed grays. And she's from Connecticut. They're all locally sourced fleeces and then locally milled. So she sources the fleeces, has it milled, and then dyes it in her kitchen. You can find her on Facebook. She also has a website. And I picked up this little brochure. You can see some of the exemplary fibers there. And they're just really attractive colorways. So I plan on doing a shawl by Roseback, which I can't remember the name of right now. I know you're like, great. But I will be, this may be what I choose to work with this weekend because it's just so gorgeous. So for the main body of the shawl, I picked this color. It's potentially close. And then there's there's 3 tiers of a floral, of a kind of like a shell, floral shell lace pattern. So one tier, so it'll go from here to here. And these blues I don't think are going to come up. To here, to here. So the blues are not representative. This is a little bit more turquoise versus royal or blue jay blue. This is a little bit more sea greeny. And this one's a little bit more, that's kind of true, kind of sagey. So I'm really psyched about that. So those I got, and that was a goal. Check mark. I love doing that. The other goal I had was, I saw this was a new vendor this year, and that was the Fields Edge Farm. She raises Clun Forest sheep, which are originating in England. They were imported into the States and to North America, in 1959, and the traces of that first importation were lost. And then in 1970, they were imported into America again via Nova Scotia. And the Clun Forest is not a very well-known sheep, I wouldn't say. It's a conservation breed. It's known for its springiness. It is comfortable and durable, as described by the Fleece and Fiber Sourcebook. And the words resilience and loft are entered in as descriptors, which I think is great to have resilience and loft at the same time. It's pretty springy due to its crimp structure. And one of the things that was very interesting that they said in the source book was that it's a great blending fiber because it will add bounce and elasticity to fibers that may not have them. For example, your Romneys or some of your longer haired sheep or even potentially mohair. I wonder how that would be as a sock yarn. Mohair and Clun Forest. Anyway, I picked up these beautiful bats to spin. This is a purple gradient. And this really does appeal to me. It's not over the top gradation, but it's enough to be like, that might be really fun. So this is 4 ounces of the Clun Forest. This is Arthur Grant and Kimberly Trider Grant in Leeds. And they just bought an old farmhouse. And what better to put in an old farmhouse pasture than sheep, which would be very traditional New England. Sheep, of course, came first in the New England area, which is half the reason we are covered in hardwoods, if you didn't know this. So originally, the areas of the Northeast were softwood forests and very large pines. Um, and a lot of that timber was cut and sent over the to Britain as we were colonized. If you know the story of the Black Arrow, the king pines in this state were marked with a black arrow. It was branded in the tree, and those king pines were used as masts for a huge portion of the Royal Navy, which again went on to conquer a large component of Africa, the East Indies, the West Indies, and so it's just a really interesting concept to think that perhaps that Navy may not have been able to exist without the resource of the Maine or Northeast king pine. There is one king pine left in the state that is marked. It was treason to cut them down. They did belong to the king, and that was death by hanging, of course. So anyway, all of these lands were cleared for livestock, and that first livestock that came in were sheep. And they grazed a variety of our mountains. Half the reason we have exposed granite in a number of the White Mountain areas was because they were heavily grazed by sheep, and that erosion took away the secondary ecology, leaving, of course, the bare granite. And as these sheep moved away, and then we moved into dairying, these pastures were kept open, and the dairying moved out. And the regeneration of those fields, a majority of the regeneration, of course, would be beech, birch, the hardwoods that come in. That's what gives us the beautiful New England pulse. I'm not even talking about textiles in time. You're already getting textiles in time. The other one I picked up, which was this is a 5-ounce vat, is here. Hello. I'm not sure how that's representing. That's pretty good. So these are my first bats. So funny. My mom, so I put these in a bag and I gave it to my mother to hold because it was like Fields Ed's Farm was here and Tidal Yarns was here, and I was like, ah! So I gave this to my mother, who promptly put it in a bag and then went like this, compressed the bag down so she could like squeeze it shut, and I was like, no! So Mom learned all about loft at the Fiber Frolic. So I'm really curious to work with this bat. She did have milled yarn. It was all white. I believe that is the traditional color of the sheep. They have black faces, and clean faces, clean legs, black faces. Very beautiful sheep. Very traditional. The last thing I acquired at the Fiber Frolic, and this is dedicated to Sarah Pomegranate of Yarns at Yahoo, was my very own lucette. And I have done this. I started it, and I actually kind of bought it for Rob to see. Maybe he might have some interest. He's a big cordage twine kind of guy. So I thought that might be fun to give that a go, seeing as we were talking about Vikings and shield maidens. And so thank you, Stephen Willett. I think he's out of New Hampshire. This is a beautiful, I just couldn't resist it. Such a gorgeous tool. And historical. So I'm trying to think if I missed anything about, nope, I think that's it. I have my notes. So I thought for Textiles in Time that we would create a context for where we might go with some of our conversations and historical references for fiber. And I recognize that people subscribe to a variety of theories, both scientific and historical, on where there is evidence of textiles in history. I'm also very well aware that history can be a bit of a sticky wicket because there is a huge spiritual component to history and a spiritual interpretation of history. There is a number of opportunities for people to find their way and how they connect with their past. In this particular context, there's that word, we're going to be talking about, for lack of a better word, perhaps, I guess I'm going to use a science word. We're going to be talking about kind of an evolutionary-based history, and we'll be beginning with the Paleolithic age. And however that fits into your personal fabric and how you understand the world, or doesn't, is up to you. But for the purposes of conversation, this is a history that I find fascinating and interesting, and it's got a variety of evidence that is compelling. So I wanted to talk about Paleolithic and Neolithic because that kind of sets the stage for where we're going to go with our Vikings. And I wanted there to be a concept of time. And time is, again, another sticky wicket. So we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about, for, I guess to be general, BCE, which is before Common Era, which would be 0 being the birth of Christ, 4 BC. And then, there's a 0, and then BC, or how do they do that? It's BCE, or yeah, BCE and CE, Common Era. Their retrospective terminology is before Christ and Anno Domini, AD and BC. So sometimes I use that language interchangeably because I grew up with before Christ and Anno Domini, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with that. But I thought I'd give BCE and CE a try. It may not stick. But we're hanging out in BC right now, E, because I want to talk about Paleolithic age and what that really means and where we kind of set the stage for fiber in our textiles in time. So prehistoric eras, I'm not going to get into the definition of prehistory, although a lot of it has to do around the ability to communicate and document time and experience. But for us, we're going to be talking about basically the lower, upper, and then the Mesolit Neolithic age. So we have the lower Paleolithic, which would be about 100 million to 500,000 years ago. And shifting into the middle Paleolithic at about 40,000 years ago. And what we see happening here in the lower Paleolithic to the middle Paleolithic are the development of stone weapons, flint axes, human symbols, and this is going to be where we find the Neanderthal. 40,000, right there is our transition time. As we shift into the upper Paleolithic, right around 30,000 years ago, we're going to start to see the last glacial period. And here's where we're going to find tool making, Homo sapiens, and human notation. We're going to see representation in art of the woman of Willendorf. You may also know her as the Venus of Willendorf, and of course the caves of Lascaux. And I want to chat here in the upper Paleolithic period a little bit because it's going to help us correspond to the Mesolithic Neolithic period. And that's really going to set the stage for where we're going to talk about fiber, because Neolithic is, I'm going to have a broader concept of that. I thought, hey, let's make sure we know that around 30,000 years ago, the last glacial period, and this is where we're going to start to find evidence of fiber. There is potential possibility that the Neanderthals were using fiber cordage that they created using wild flax. But we know that in the upper Paleolithic time that this is where they began to use cordage for sewing clothing, and there again is even the possibility, and samples have been found, of quote unquote dyed cordage. And so this is again, these are theories. These are things that have been found, and there's speculation about them. So just for an example, I just wanted to make sure that for those of you who were not familiar with the caves of Lascaux, they're in France, and you can no longer go inside of them. They have replicated them, and you can visit the replicated caves. The moisture that was being tracked in to this historical site was actually deteriorating the ochre paint and charcoal ash that was used to do these creations. So these are very famous, and many people have a visual concept of that. This is the famous woman of Willendorf. It's found in present-day lower Austria, 30,000 to 25,000 years ago. And this book is one that I used for teaching. It's called The Creative Impulse. I used it for my Western Civ class, and I'll use it for the basis of this prehistoric era. But I may branch out for some other concepts. So here it is, where we found twine in the caves of Lascaux, and these were, again, a wild flax cordage that had probably been threaded and twisted. It was an interesting thing that I came across for interpretation of this cordage is that it wasn't an origination that it wasn't the fact that we found this at 26,000 and it was the ability to be used in an effective way potentially leads archaeologists to believe that in fact the tradition and the skill had been going on much longer because of the ability of that or the complexity of that artifact. So while the sample was found and dated to around 26,000 years ago, the plant fibers, it doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't a tradition prior to that. There is speculation that this technology of using plant fiber for cordage and perfecting that skill enabled the Homo sapiens which would be us, to migrate and to create more durable gear and more durable clothing so they could trek. And there is even the possibility that this meant that they were able to trek across the land bridge to the Bering Sea. And that's going to be, we're looking at around 10,000 BCE for that experience. This Upper Paleolithic period is the last glacial period, and so glaciers are receding, and that's shifting environment. It's also shifting food sources. This is where we see the extinction of the woolly mammoth. We see reindeer moving further north, and so people are responding to that shift in food source. And they're doing that as they transition from a food gathering society to a food production society. So that shift in environment and the technology that had come to fruition at that time really enabled people to manage and respond effectively and also disperse. And as those areas opened up, I'm just checking my notes. So just something really interesting to think about as far as textiles are concerned and the effect that might have had on that last glacial period as it shifted into the Mesolithic Neolithic period. This is the final retreat of the glaciers. This is where we see the domestication of the dog, pottery, mining, and that food is shifting here. So, that set of circumstances leading us right up to about 10,000 BC, which I think is a movie. It's going to set the stage for where we're going next, which is the Neolithic period. Just to give you some landmarks as to how far back we are. So if we're looking at the Mesolithic Neolithic period, we're looking at 20,000 years, 10,000 years ago. And we're looking at the first documented woolen textiles are dating to 3,500 years ago, or I think 3,500 BCE. 3,500 years ago. So that would be 2,000 and then 1,500. Silk, 5,000 years ago. Alpacas were domesticated 7,000 years ago, and sheep were domesticated 9,000 years ago, which would put them right around the Neolithic time. Think Mesopotamia, Tigris and Euphrates, that type of conversation. So That glacial recession, that last glacial period, the Upper Paleolithic, the shifting of food sources, the technology of being able to manage wild flax fibers and bind it into cordage and twine, enabling a more diverse gear setup for migration, the land bridge appearing due to that shifting, and then people realizing that their food sources were shifting as well, and then starting to be a little bit more inclined to do food production versus food gathering. So we see domestication right around the Mesolithic Neolithic period, so post 20,000 years ago. I think that's all I want to say. The area that we're talking about here is kind of a Spain, it's kind of a Western Eastern Europe experience, heading down into, of course, the Mesopotamia, Israel, present day Israel, and when we're looking and we're thinking about human sites at this time, if we're going back to lower Paleolithic, we're kind of relegated to points in Africa up into the very tip of Britain and kind of heading down and coming across and to China and India and then into off the coast of Australia. So those were some of the larger sites where they have found human fossil remains dating and corresponding and correlating to this time period. So, 30 to 20,000 years ago, we see the introduction of plant fiber. 26,000 years ago, there is evidence. And that plant fiber, I mean, I'm not saying it's the linchpin in the historical experience, but you can take a history lesson and base it off of a technology or a resource, and watch how that permeates and reverberates through a culture and through a historical time, and how it creates change. So thanks, flax, for enabling us to create some sturdier gear and think about cultivation, and I guess and being able to bind tools together. And so contextually, next time we're going to talk about the Neolithic age, and I'm not going to say things aren't happening here. There's burials here. We know the Neanderthals had actual, were burying people and acknowledging some sort of spirituality. We have human symbols. We have domesticating dogs and pottery and mining leading up to the Neolithic time period. That Neolithic time period is where we're going to really get to talk about wool and weaving and spinning and sheep domestication. I'm going to look a little bit further into the domestication of the alpacas, so we'll try to mix it up a little bit with our geography. But for this particular time, we're looking at Western and Eastern Europe and parts of Africa, kind of there. So I don't feign to be a professor. I'm just giving a little bit of insight and opportunity to think about that timeline of how things are coming together. Okay, textiles and time. So next, I'll do my research. It probably won't be next week. It might be next week. I got to talk to Morgan about the megafauna in a minute. So we might try to intersperse that. I did try to keep it fairly light without a ton of facts, and I did use the Creative Impulse as my resource, as well as the Fleece and Fiber source book to support some of that. I don't at all want to come across that this is 100% proven. These are, and I think the word speculation is probably a little bit too shallow. That describes the amount of research and thought that's gone into this. But again, it is, who knows? Which is what I love about it. So, Fiber Trek. We did a shoot with Nanny Kennedy last Sunday, and that was intense and a long day. That's part of the reason I didn't record. So I had to recover from that, and it was a worthwhile day. We got a lot of great footage. It was absolutely gorgeous, and Nanny's farm is beautiful, and really enjoyed getting to see her routine on her farm, as well as have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about her yarns and the process of dyeing, not necessarily the secrets and magic of dyeing. But Nanny Kennedy does use solar power, and she talks a little bit about that closed system and that concept of how she creates a system on her farm from sheep to yarn. And I did get goodies. Of course I got goodies. Rob got goodies because it was his birthday. So he got a skein of the natural colored yarn. This is her natural. This is pumpernickel. You can order this right on her website, getwool.com. And I picked out to complement a skein I had already picked up a couple years ago. I got this beautiful turquoise. It's a little bit lighter than that. It's a little bit more muted than that. Okay. So we did pick those up. I should have put them in acquisitions and discoveries, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about that with the shoot. I'm going to hurry along. I hope you've enjoyed the Textiles in Time, because there wasn't much works in progress. And I will look to get a little bit more knitting done, and I will look to perhaps create a little bit more organization around my Textiles in Time, so that in fact it will be perhaps a little bit more historic or research based versus a conversation. But really that's kind of what I want it to be, is a conversation. With that, it's a fond farewell. There is the Island Wool Knit Along still going on, and you can certainly, if you are on Instagram, hashtag Island Wool Knit Along. I'd love to see what you're working on. We have a couple beautiful entries and a number of Shield Maidens, and go ahead and take a look at those in the thread if you're looking for some inspiration. You can find me on Instagram as Fibertrek TV. You can find me on Facebook as Fibertrek. You can find me on our website at fibertrektv.com. The blog is fibertrek.wordpress.com, and of course you can email me, fibertrek@gmail.com. And I guess with that, I will leave you. I have been catching up on a number of other podcasts, including Prairie Girls, which I love, Down Cellar Studio podcast with Boston Jen. She had a great review of Portland, which is kind of my hometown, and it was awesome. And I've also been tuning into the Knit British podcast these days. So I'm going to go catch up on some of those and sit back before I have to go to my dinner meeting. And I hope you have a great week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.